So what's our agenda for today? We're going to have a quick look at what Azure is, so get a brief understanding of what it is. It is a very large product, so again, we have a deeper dive on that and a number of sessions, a number of Wednesdays down the track. We'll then look at Azure and Office 365 Identity, how those work together and how Azure provides the identity management basically for Office 365. We'll then talk about how to enable access to the Azure control panel from your Office 365. So Azure is included as a free option with every Office 365 tenant, and enabling that will give you a number of additional features. One of those features is, for example, the report section. So you'll be able to get some more comprehensive reports through the Azure portal. You'll also be able to go in and customize your Office 365 using Azure. This is a great option, certainly provides an important point of differentiation for customers, makes them feel more ownership of the product. So I'll give you a brief overview on how to do that. We'll also show you how to create a web single sign-on portal. So what this allows you to do is include a number of SaaS or web-based applications into a portal and have a number of tiles that the users can simply click on. It will automatically log them into those services. Now that's something that can be controlled at the back end by the provider and managed through the Azure portal. So not only can you access Office 365 from this portal, but you can also access generally any web-based application. And we'll finish off with our best practices and takeaways. So let's get into it. What is Azure? One of the major questions that you hear these days, because Azure is such a large product. It does so much for so many people. Now, the way I like to define it is I see Azure as your on-demand data center. What this means is that many providers don't have the resources to build their own data center, to host their own private cloud, to run virtual machines. And even if they did, there's a significant investment that is required around maintaining the hardware, keeping it up, so all the normal data center stuff. So rather than doing that, creating your own private cloud, you can use Azure as your own data center and use it on demand. So again, you only pay for what you use. It's a consumption-based service. So if you need a virtual machine for 15 minutes, 15 hours, you only pay for that usage. Now, again, don't forget that this data center has more than just virtual machines, networking. It also has the ability to create websites, to host SQL databases, and do a huge amount of other things. So even if now you're a small provider, you can get access to a data center. If you have clients, no matter whether they're big or small, they can now access all the benefits of a data center and just pay for it as they need it. So when we look at cloud computing these days, what we see is a range of services that are provided. So starting on the left-hand side, we start off with the traditional packaged software. This means that you have to manage everything from the networking level all the way up to the applications. You install it, you have to manage the PC, patch it, update it. This becomes quite onerous and can also prevent productivity benefits. When we move into the cloud and into something like Azure, we can implement at a first stage what's called infrastructure as a service, or IaaS. What that means is that Microsoft, for example, manages the virtualization and the networking stack. All you need to worry about is the operating system up to the application. Now, because you're managing the OS and the data and the application, you still have to patch and maintain that. But the virtualization service underneath, Microsoft is handling all of that. So this is typically a great way to run a domain controller, to run virtual servers, to run a huge range of other options. The next option you've got to the right is Platform as a Service, or PaaS. What this means is now the operating system and the middleware excuse me, goes to Microsoft management, and all you need to worry about is the application of the data. So this option here is basically known, for example, as SQL, Azure SQL. So all you need to worry about in Azure SQL is the data and some configuration. The third option last option that we have here on the right is software as a service. So think of that as Office 365. In that case, Microsoft is managing all the stack, all the way through the data. It's backing it up, it's making it available, it's pushing it into its data centers, it's managing the patch level, the update of the applications. So what we get with Azure typically is around the ability to do infrastructure as a service and also platform as a service. So what does Azure include? What sort of services do we see in Azure? So again, as noted, excuse me, sorry about that. What we see typically in Azure is a user-based service. As I mentioned, you only pay for what you consume. Now you'll see that it also has application services around things like development, content delivery networks, all of that for developing applications. But at the compute level, we also see virtual machines, cloud services, and mobile services. We've got the ability to have storage, so we can store SQL databases, we can install blobs, just binary large data. And at the networking level, we've got our virtual networks, we've got Traffic Manager, and we've got the ability to connect our network on-premise to Azure to extend the reach of our on-premise equipment. The advantage here is obviously we can integrate it with what we already have, we can extend it, and we get the ability and the advantages of things like a 99.95% SLA from Microsoft, and again patching and updating of the services that Microsoft look after. So again, remember that we have Azure data centers here in Sydney and Melbourne, along with Office 365 as well. So these data centers with Azure are local, but you can again position your Azure services in any Microsoft data center around the world that you choose. So with that very brief overview of Azure, let's have a look at Office 365 Identity. So the way that the first step in Office 365 is that you basically log in using an MS Online ID. So you log in with user at tenantname.microsoftonline.com. That identity is managed in the cloud, and typically this, as it says here, is for smaller organizations who don't need typically to have an Active Directory, probably don't need to have on-premise servers, are very simple in their arrangement. Now there are some downsides to doing this. You don't get single sign-on, you don't get the ability of two-factor authentication. If you are logging into a workstation or a network on-premise, then you're going to have to maintain two sets of logins. The second option is to basically synchronize your on-premise directory to the Microsoft Online identity, and you do that using a product called DirSync. There are some updates to that, but most people know it as DirSync. Again, the idea here is that you take a copy of the properties of your AD, your users, your groups, your contacts, those sort of things, and you basically create a copy of those into Office 365 so the users and identities are identical. Downsides here again is we don't unfortunately get single sign-on directly with on-premise existing applications, and we don't get two-factor authentication. But the important thing to realize is that with Microsoft Online Identities, we're actually using an Azure AD. So what that means is there is an AD which is storing the identities, managing them, and it's done directly through Azure. The second option here is we're still using the Azure AD, but we've linked it through a synchronization process to our local Windows Server Active Directory. So our Windows Server Active Directory is basically taking a copy and pushing that up into Azure AD so that they are similar. The third option here, which that is mentioned, is what they call federated IDs, which does require again DirSync to copy up some of the properties, but this is typically for larger organizations because you'll need additional on-premise equipment. This is typically known as an ADFS implementation. This has a lot of advantages, obviously in single sign-on and that, but the disadvantage is that the identity now is moved away from Azure AD and actually moved back to the on-premise Windows Server Active Directory. So the Windows Server that your AD is on, if you do the ADFS or the federated IDs, that becomes the primary identity point, which means if you get a failure of that AD or a failure of your internet connection, then people generally struggle to log in to Office 365 and those services. So the most preferred option is generally the second one, in which we have the directory synchronization, a copy of our local AD up to Windows Azure. Therefore our Office 365 users are the same as those on our local AD. Now, typically the way that this has been done early on was using a product called Directory Sync or DirSync, and that, as you can see, basically synchronizes the users and groups up to the Windows Azure AD. The problem with the original DirSync is it didn't support password synchronization. So unfortunately, users in the cloud would have a different password to that, potentially to that which is on-premise, because those attributes weren't synchronized. Now, the update to that DirSync tool was a tool called Azure AD Sync Services. Again, it is an update to DirSync. It does exactly the same as what DirSync does, but it also synchronizes passwords. Copies passwords. So what it will do is take a copy of the local user's password, create a hash, send that hash securely up to the cloud, and then use that. So that meant that users were able to log into their Office 365 services using the same login and password they would use on-premise. So again, if you're not currently using Azure AD Sync services, certainly something you should look at doing and upgrade your existing DirSync installation. Again, it was a major improvement and is recommended as an upgrade for most installs of DirSync to get that ability to synchronize passwords. Now, the tool that has just gone general availability is called Azure AD Connect. This again will replace DirSync and will replace Azure AD Sync services. And the benefit that it provides is that we will synchronize your Windows Server Active Directory to Azure AD. It will also synchronize other directories. So maybe you've got an LDAP directory or some other third-party directory service. Azure AD Connect will allow you to synchronize those. Once it has synchronized those, it can then push or copy that identity or use the identity into things like Microsoft CRM, Office 365, Windows Intune, as well as some non-Microsoft-based cloud applications. So Azure AD is basically becoming very quickly a default option to manage identity for cloud environment, not only for Microsoft products, but also for other third parties. Now, the other thing that we're also getting here, which we'll cover in a future webinar, is the idea that we can now start managing our PCs and our devices because we've moved the identity management and a lot of the power and functionality into the cloud, which means as long as the devices have access to the internet, which most devices do these days, they can then be controlled and managed much better through Azure AD. And remember, we're still talking about the ability here to synchronize or copy information from your local AD into Azure AD so that they are similar and then receive all these benefits. So again, there is a lot of benefit in using and integrating with Azure AD, especially when you've got clients who are using Office 365. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what Azure AD actually is. So Azure AD, again, is very much like what you would be familiar with in existing AD on-premise. So again, it provides identity and access management. As yet, it's not exactly the same. It's not the full features of an on-premise AD, but it certainly is moving that way very quickly. So again, it again includes things like your directory services, you can do your governance, you can do your management, again, and developers can also use that to build on. So rather than a developer having to write their own identity management, their own login and their password management and maintaining that, they can then use the APIs via Azure AD to access that and control identity. So there are 3 versions of Azure AD that are available today. You have the free version. The free version is what comes with Office 365. You have a basic version and a premium version, both of which require investment to get those. So again, let's look a little bit deeper into the Azure AD versions. What do you get? So with the free version, you get basic user account management, synchronization with your on-premise directory, a single sign-on to Azure Office 365, and lots of web-based applications, which we will show you. With the basic versions, again, you get the same, all the functionality of the free version, plus you get group-based management, you get a self-service password reset for cloud applications, you get a guaranteed uptime and a lot of additional features. And the final version is you get the premium, again, you get all the features of basic and free, plus you get more enterprise level management, branding, controlling, and a lot of these other features. Now, one of the things I will point out here is that if you have an Office 365 tenant, for example, the premium feature of branding has been made available to those users who have Office 365. So the premium feature of branding has been made available free to Office 365 tenants. So what we're seeing generally is a lot of the premium features are now moving their way back down into the basic and even in the free version so that people can take advantage of these. Obviously, the premium version continues to improve, and we'll cover that in more detail in an upcoming webinar. So how do you access your free Azure AD in Office 365? So what you need to do firstly is you need to log in to your Azure AD tenant as a global administrator. When you go to the admin page, on the left hand side down the bottom, you'll see the admin options for Exchange, SharePoint and whatnot. One of those options will be Azure AD. So simply select that. You'll then be taken to a sign up page where you'll need to complete the details there and also do a mobile verification where a SMS code will be sent to you. Note here the difference is that you'll be not prompted for a credit card. So if you sign up for an Azure trial, you are normally prompted for a credit card, even though it is a free trial. Here, when you sign up for Azure AD via the Office 365 portal, all you're prompted for is just for some user details. No credit card is required. What that will then happen is it will take a minute or two for the Azure portal to be provisioned, and it will only take 2 or 3 minutes for it to do that. You'll see that warning or that update message on the screen. Once that has completed, you should see the page illustrated there, and in the top right hand corner you'll be able to select the option to actually visit the portal. Now, when you select that, you'll be open to an Azure AD management screen. I don't know if you haven't seen that. Here's a bit of a quick screenshot. If we get some time, we will go into a bit of a demo on this real life. But basically what you'll see is rather than seeing all the Azure AD service you would typically see when you sign up for a trial, you will just see an Active Directory. So remember, this Active Directory is the same as the Office 365. So if you actually select that and drill into that and then click on Users, for example, you should then see all the users who are part of your Office 365 environment. So if you're synchronizing with your local AD, you should see the same AD users in this Azure AD. If you're just using Cloud Identity with nothing on premise, you will see the users there as well. So that's the important thing to remember. Now you have set up your access to the Azure AD management portal, and that's as simple as doing that. And again, you can do that for all the Office 365 tenants that you manage or maintain. It's available to all of those items. So once we've selected and once we've enabled our Azure AD portal, we now get the ability to access some things that we don't get through Office 365. Now, one of these is the tenant reports. So again, if you drill into the directory and have a look, you will see again the users and groups on the left, but to the right you'll also see a reports option. So if you select that, you'll see, for example, there are a number of free reports. So one of these reports is for example, sign-ins to unknown sources or multiple geographies. So if someone signs into a Office 365 in Sydney and then 2 minutes later in Tokyo, that will then obviously flag a report and be able to, for you to be able to have a look at and drill into. Now, these reports are broken into obviously the free reports at the top. There are some premium reports at the bottom. To get access to the premium reports at this stage, you would need to purchase or add on to this subscription Azure AD Premium. Now, you can buy that a number of different ways. One of the ways to do it is to look at purchasing the Enterprise Mobility Suite. That will give you a subscription to Azure AD Premium along with some additional mobile management capabilities. But certainly you get a number of free reports that you can make use of that are generally not surfaced in the Office 365 admin portal. Now, the next thing that you can do once you have enabled your Azure AD environment is you can turn on or you can enable Office 365 branding. Now, what do I mean by Office 365 branding? So if you log into Office 365 now, which is what you'll see on the left-hand side, you'll see a lovely landscape of Santa Monica. And what you can do with the branding here is, as you'll see on the right, I have taken another image that I preferred, and also you'll note my logo appears rather than the Office 365 logo. Now, when the domain is identified, that will automatically change and be displayed. Now, that picture there on the left obviously can be a graphic, but maybe if you're a service provider, you could create a graphic that is information about your business, or perhaps how users can log a support ticket to get in contact with you. So you can certainly customize that image on the left along with the logo that appears at the top. So how do you do that? So if you want to brand your tenant, what you need to do is, again, log into your Azure AD. Then you need to select the option here called Configure. Once you go to that option, you will see there is a button there called Branding. Again, if you just select that, this will then pop up with another window that allows you, as you see, to enter the banner logo and also the tile logo. You can put in some sign-in text on the page, maybe alerting users to a contact number or support number, and a sign-in page illustration, and also a background color if you want to do that. Now, if you want more information about the required sizes and the information and the best practices around branding your Office 365 portal, again, have a look at the URL that I have listed here. That should give you all the details and a step-by-step process of working through that. So the next one that we can start creating is an Azure single sign-on web portal. Now, the way we do that, again, we go into our Azure AD, we then select the applications option. Now, when we select the applications option, what you'll see is we already have a number of pre-configured applications. Typically, these are going to be Office 365 Exchange Online and SharePoint Online. But you'll notice down the bottom there that what we get is the ability to select to add an application. So we can now add an application to this single sign-on portal. Now, when we select to add an application, we'll be prompted as to whether we add it from a gallery, so some ones that have already been pre-created, or we can actually add it also from one that we're developing. So if you're able to do that, you can create your own customized applications that you can surface through the portal. So there is that option to do that if you're a bit of a developer as well. Once I've selected that, you'll see that I get a list of all the applications that I can add to my single sign-on portal. Now, if you look closely under all in the top left, you'll see that at the moment there are about 2,400 applications, and they're all broken up by different demographics there. So what I've done in this case is I've done a search for Evernote. So Evernote's a very popular note-taking application, not quite as good as OneNote, I don't believe, but certainly very handy. And you'll see when I do a search for that, that application then pops up. Now, if I want to add that to my single sign-on portal, I simply select that. And then what it does, it will add it to my portal. As you'll see, it's configured for single sign-on. And then I can then select a button to assign which users will have this app appear in their single sign-on portal. So what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to be able to add as many apps as I want, and then I can nominate which users can actually have access to this application via their portal. So when I select that, you'll see that I get a list of users in my tenant, and I can select the user that I want, in this case Lewis Collins, and I'm going to assign Evernote rights to that user, just that user. So when I do that, I'm now prompted for the Evernote login and password. So a good example here is if you have a business that has maybe one Facebook account they're using for their corporate image, but they need to share that across multiple users within their organization, that you don't want the fact that everybody knowing the login and the password. So if someone leaves, then they have to change the password. In this case, what I'm doing is, as an administrator, I'm configuring the login and password, but then what I'm doing is making that available to users once they log into the portal, which they do with their Office 365 credentials. This means they don't or will never know the password for the application. Azure AD will basically log them directly into the application. So once you put the login and the password, you'll then see that the application has been assigned just to that user, okay, as we've got there in the list of applications at the bottom there. So then what happens is that rather than logging into Office 365, what a user can do is they can log into the URL myapps.microsoft.com using their Office 365 login and credentials. Exactly the same, because again, we're based on Azure AD. So when we log into Office 365, we're really logging into Azure AD. We're logging into myapps.microsoft.com, we're logging into Azure AD. So once we log into this with our Office 365 credentials, we'll be presented with a web-based single sign-on portal. Now, as you can see here, the Office 365 Exchange and SharePoint Online for that user has already been populated, but you'll notice that I have added Citrix GoToMeeting, Dropbox, and there you will see Evernote. So now if the user goes in and selects Evernote, what will happen is that will open a new window that will then log the user into that application using the login and the password that I have previously populated without them ever having to type in anything. So now they can use that web-based application as they need fit, close down with it, and then again access that through their single sign-on portal. So that means that it's secure. As an administrator, you can remove or add that access at any time to manage that for an organization. Now, not only that, once you add the application into the Azure AD portal, what you'll be able to do in the management console is actually go in and monitor that application. You'll be able to see when users are using it, how much time they're spending on it, and again, manage that in a much better way that's currently probably not taking place. So again, the Azure AD not only gives you the ability to create the single sign-on portal, it also gives you the ability to manage, monitor, and maintain this in the background. Now, one of the most impressive parts about the single sign-on portal is just the sheer number of web-based applications it supports. So again, you'll probably see many of the most popular ones here. You can customize it, and these are constantly being added to over time. So what I'll do now is let me just pop over to my machine here and actually give you a live demonstration of how this all works in practice. So give that screen a minute to present. So hopefully now you can see my Windows desktop. Now what I've got here is I'm just going to run the single sign-on portal application. Okay, now what I've done already is I've already logged into this once, so it's already populated. As you can see, I have my Exchange online, I have my SharePoint online, but I've got Dropbox and Evernote. But you'll notice here that I've also added LinkedIn. So now if I just click on my LinkedIn, what it will do is it prompts me, checks the software. You'll see now that it is logging into LinkedIn. I didn't have to put a login or a password in to use LinkedIn at all. So another example here is if I go to, for example, my OneDrive. This is my personal OneDrive. Okay, so again, it now checks for the software that it requires and then basically logs me directly into that portal without me needing to do that at all. So it allows a user, it allows you to create a portal that you can now put all your web-based apps, including Office 365, and manage those directly for the user. You'll also notice that we have a profile here. So again, this is being pulled from my Office 365. Again, we can, for example, set up things like a user managed password reset portal for cloud users. We can also user can elect to change their password via this portal. So again, a lot of flexibility given here, and again, perhaps it's an option to have users log into this rather than logging in directly into Office 365 if they need to access more items in the portal there. So what I've swapped over to here is I've logged in as the administrator to the Azure AD portal in the background here, and as I noted, you have only 3 items. What I've got here is my Active Directory, okay, and you'll see here I only have the one, and it is tied to my Office 365. So if I now go into my users, these are all my Office 365 users, right, throughout my organization. So you'll see here a couple of shared mailboxes. So these are basically all the users there. And again, if I want, I can drill into them. I can look at some of their properties. You know, I can make changes here, and that will be reflected basically in my Office 365 because it is based on the same identity. Now, if I go back, again, we can set up and manage groups and what we had a look at here. So let me just pop across to reports. So if you have a look at the reports, you'll see at the top here, we get those reports I talked about, and then as we go down the bottom here, you'll see that I also have available the premium reports. So the premium reports are part of Azure AD Premium, which you would need to subscribe to if you wanted to get to those. But again, if I go to configure, what you'll see here is that I have those options, as I mentioned, to go in and customize my branding. Okay, you'll see that I also have the ability here to set up a user reset policy password. So again, what I can do is create a portal where cloud-based users can go in and basically say, I forgot my password. It will then, in my case here, prompt them for a mobile phone and an alternate email address so that they can then recover their password. So again, there's a lot of options here that you can configure and look at. So don't forget to go through those and work out what is best for your organization. So again, the way that this works is that we get to the user gets to their application basically via myapps.microsoft.com, and the way that an administrator gets to their Azure once they have configured it is via the URL manage.windowsazure.com. All right, so let me just swap back to the slides and walk us through towards the end of our webinar. Give that a minute to present. Okay, so again, let's finish off with some best practices and some takeaways here. So you need to understand how the different identities in Office 365 work, the cloud-based ones, the synchronized identities, and also the federated IDs. What is the difference? What are the benefits? What are the challenges? And what are the advantages and how they work? But remember, for the cloud-based ones and the synchronized ones, Azure AD plays a very important component. I would suggest you enable the free Azure AD on all the Office 365 tenants to give you access to all the other options that I've mentioned here, especially around branding. I think branding is a big thing that a lot of people could add to their Office 365 installations to make it more personal and potentially push their brand out across their customers. Again, look at configuring the additional functionality in Office 365. So we're talking about, in this case, the single sign-on portal. Again, show customers, there are a lot of most customers I know are using some sort of web-based applications and are generally struggling to manage it because they've got different identities, different logins, multi-user access. So again, you can make that all very easy for them using Azure AD single sign-on portal. And again, once you've gone to the limit of what's provided free with Office 365 and Azure, don't forget you can now add a paid Azure subscription to light up things like virtual machines, virtual networking, machine learning. All that sort of stuff is now available, and even if you want the Azure AD Premium. So again, don't forget that you can start off with the free, but you can also add an Azure AD Premium or more Azure subscription on top of that to increase the functionality that is available. So my takeaways are, if you're not using Azure today, you really start needing to use Azure to get familiar with it. Even if you don't plan to roll it out to customers, certainly make sure that you're aware of it, understand it, and use it so that you at least can navigate around it. Take advantage of your partner benefits. If you have an action pack, you will be receiving $100 worth of Azure credits, which renew every month. So you can use $100 worth of Azure resources every month to do testing, to run up virtual machines, to do whatever you need to do demonstrations. So if you're a Microsoft partner and you have something like Action Pack, you already have Azure benefits that you should be taking advantage of. And look at what benefits Azure can provide to your customers. So again, do they need those reporting items? Do they potentially need a single sign-on portal? But potentially maybe you can upsell the features of Azure AD Premium or the mobile device management or all that sort of stuff. I mean, again, you've sold Office 365. Typically people have sold just Exchange or email. Don't forget, you need to light up all the opportunities within Office 365 around Yammer, Skype for Business and whatnot. But don't forget, then beyond that, you've got the opportunities around Azure, the single sign-on portal, and beyond that, even further, is the paid options in Azure, virtual machines, virtual networking, Azure SQL, all that sort of stuff. So again, it's really, really a huge opportunity to take advantage of, all built on a very similar platform. And again, you can now manage your Office 365 and your customers much better through Azure. Azure supports PowerShell. You can manage that. You can create automation in Azure. Again, all this sort of stuff is really, really much easier to do with Azure AD combined with Office 365. And I think one of the biggest opportunities is the ability to go to a customer and extend the reach. If they're happy, if they're using Office 365, they're getting the benefits, look at extending the functionality of that with the single sign-on portal. They log into the single sign-on portal to get to Office 365. They can use that to get to their other cloud apps and potentially custom apps you create or general websites or whatever. But again, you're now extending that functionality for the customer, making them more productive by using those tools to their fullest extent. And then when they get beyond those limits, you can add more to your environment than is required. So a quick number of resources here for you. What is Azure AD? The different Azure AD editions, lots of great videos on the Channel 9 Azure AD videos. And again, I've done some blog posts here around Azure AD Connect, Azure AD Sync services, and Azure AD Sync